Our first storyteller of the evening, or the afternoon, is Mark Peugh. Mark, where are you? There you are. Mark, come on up.
But I am a whitewater enthusiast, and I've been doing that for several decades. I've been fortunate enough to be able to raft the Grand Canyon several times, and I'm lined up to do it again in September. I need to give you a little bit of background information. The event that I'm going to tell you about, when I was on that trip, I was alone in my own boat. I've got a 14-foot self-bailer. They do allow 12-foot boats down there, but 14 is pretty small considering the size of the water down there. When I say it's a self-bailer, that means that any water that gets in it automatically sheds out the bottom. A couple of terms that you should be familiar with that I'm going to use: PFD, personal flotation device, otherwise known as a life vest. Okay. Hazards are those things in the river that you want to avoid. It's going to be important that you know the construction of a oar. You've got the handle, the shaft, and the blade. That'll come into play, a little further down the road. A hole is a type of hazard, and holes are typically created by some sort of an obstacle, generally a large rock that either falls from the cliff above, maybe it's washed out from a side canyon in a debris field, and as the water flows and you've got this rock in the water comes up over the top of it so that you've got this rise, and then when you fall down the other side of that, it's a little deeper, a little steeper, and it's usually got a curl wave on the back of it. Small holes, fun, splashy, wet. Big holes, not good. Avoid them. They're hazards. So, for most people, rafting, down the Colorado River is all about adventure. It's all about relaxation. And I can tell you that when I'm doing it and you're sitting there and you're gazing up at the rim about a mile above you, my brain just goes into hyperdrive. And I just think about the length of time that it took to create all this. And it reminds me of the flash of light that my life is in comparison to all this. Keeps me pretty right-sized. It really does. And while, a lot of people come to the Grand Canyon, it's a premier rafting destination on the planet. A lot of people come for the scenery, but I can tell you that the rapids are frequent and they're serious. There's about 80 rapids between Lee's Ferry and Diamond Creek. And my experience has been, if you're not paying attention, any one of them can flip you like a pancake, okay? And all rapids are a little different. All of the hazards can be a little different. Some you got holes, some you got laterals, some you got steep eddy lines, you got other boaters. You got a lot of things to look out for in the rapids, but there's one thing that all of these rapids have in common: water temperature. The Colorado River in the Grand Canyon is fed from the Glen Canyon Dam, and it comes out 300 feet below the surface. And it is an organ-shrinking, eye-popping 43 degrees. And if you happen to find yourself outside the boat, you got a couple of minutes, okay, before your blood flow is directed to your major organs and you lose the use of your arms and legs. And if you haven't rescued yourself by then, you're going to need to be rescued. So having said that, this story is about one of those rapids. You've probably... some of you may have heard about Lava Falls. It's one of the more famous rapids in the whitewater world. There's Dubendorf, and there's, Bedrock, and there's House Rock. There's a number of them down there. But the one that I'm going to talk about today is at mile 94.2, and it's Crystal Falls. Okay, Crystal Falls is rated 9 on the 10 scale. And if you're wondering how they get a rating on a rapid, there's two factors that come into play. One, what's the degree of oarsmanship it's going to take to successfully run this rapid? And two, what's the price for failure? And when you get to Crystal Falls, the price for failure can be high because it's a long rapid and there's a lot of hazards in the middle of it. There's a gravel bar on the lower right-hand side, but the big hazard with Crystal Falls is a ginormous hole center at the bottom of the rapid. And if you get in that, chances are very, very good that you're going to wind up upside down. So we get to mile 94. We tie up our boats. Any rapid over about a 6, you're going to want to take a look at. And the reason is because these rapids change. Even if I had been down there last year or whatever, these rocks that have fallen in that create these rapids, the currents have a tendency to move them a little bit. Okay, so if you show up a second time at a rapid, you can't run it twice. Because when you get there, the rapid has changed. And so have you. So we're sitting there and we're looking at this rapid as we approach it. You can hear it a long ways before you get there, but as you walk up on it, the power of this rapid is letting itself be known, and we are evaluating it to see which is going to be the better way to run. And on this particular trip, the prescribed run appeared to be to try to cheat the big hole at the bottom by hugging the right bank as best you can. Okay. Getting down beyond the big hole and then entering the current and going from there. The problem with that is that you got your stern up against the side of the river. You hit rocks. You're going downstream. If you lose an oar, the gravity of that hole is still going to suck you in, and that could be a problem. But there was 3 of us that stood up on a big rock, and we looked across the river over at River Left, and it looked like a pretty sweet little run over there. And it looked like, okay, I'm going to have to make a couple of moves, but if I'm successful, this is going to be a fun run. And so we 3 of us decide that that's what we're going to do. We walk back upstream, untie our boats, start floating in towards the rapid. Just a show of hands, has anybody been rafting? Good number of people. Anybody that's done big water knows that feeling when you're floating up to it, okay? And I can tell you, the closer you get to it, the louder it gets. The closer you get to it, the more of it you can see, because these rapids usually have a 0 horizon line, all right? They got, for instance, lava has a 27-foot vertical on the back side of it. So I'm up on this rock picking a line to see where I'm going to enter the rapid, okay? But when you're on the water and you're only 3 feet above the water coming into that and you can't see it, you don't have any idea, really where you're at. So my heart's beating like a big bass drum. Every time I come up on a rapid, I gotta pee. I don't know what it is with that, but I just do. And as you get closer, the speed's picking up. The wind is usually coming upriver, and some mist is coming off of those white caps. You're getting to see more and more of them. And there's no turning back now. I've gone from about probably 5 mile an hour. I'm probably up to about 12 mile an hour. And I am from here to these first tables from the first hole. And the way this lays out when I float up on it is there's a big hole on the left, there's a tongue, there's center, another hole over here, center right, and then the big hole is down the hole a little further. But I'm figuring that what I need to do is I need a downstream ferry, which is turned sideways to the hole, row backwards, because that's where I've got my power, okay? I'm going to float right up on the hole, pull back right before I get to the hole, straighten the nose, down the tongue, push forward, miss that second hole. I'm up on the wall. I got nothing but a clean run, for the next 100 yards all the way down this rapid. Okay, so everything's going according to plan. Everything's good. I'm poised. I dig those oars in for a nice, good bite to be able to pull back. And as I do, that left oar, that upstream oar, all of a sudden shoots straight up in the air. And I turn around and look, and there is no blade attached to my oar. I'm at the top of a Class 9 rapid with 43-degree temperature, and I got 1 oar, and it's really difficult to navigate with just the 1 oar. Well, instantaneously, I don't have any time to react. Instantaneously, my boat is pulled sideways into that first hole. The wave collapses on top of me, crushes me down to the bottom of the boat. My boat immediately fills with water, and just reactionary, I just yelled, "God, we're in the shit now." Just like that, he heard me. Here, you got it? So I don't even have time to react. I'm face down in the water with this boat, and the next thing I experience is a rising sensation. And I feel my boat starting to rise. And it's unmistakable, and I, groundhog my head up, look around a little bit or whatever, and my boat continues to come up, and it was as if 2 large hands came underneath my boat. It picked it up, it took it out of the hole, and it placed it in a place of neutrality behind and left of the hole, and the water was perfectly calm. And I'm sitting there, and the water's gushing out of my boat, and nothing's happening. Okay, I've expected that I'm tossed out of the boat by now. The boat's flipped. I'm washing. I'm already 50 yards downstream, trying to get people's attention, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm in the calm of the storm. From me to you, the water is raging. It's still loud, okay, but I am really not hearing anything at that particular point. It's just quiet. And I reach over and I take my broken oar out of the lock and I set it in the boat and pull my spare oar out, drop it in, and still I'm just hovering in this duck pond. It's just perfectly calm. And I don't know what's up with that, but I look and it's like, okay, well, if I just push my boat back into the current here, I'll be able to ride this wave train all the way to the bottom, no harm, no foul. And so I do. And it happens just like that. I get to the bottom and I am excited. I am trying to get other people's attention. It's like, did you guys see what just happened? I nearly died. I could have died, but they're not paying any attention. They're reorganizing the gear on their boat or watching the next, boat or, run or whatever. And I'm trying to gather myself, just trying to comprehend, the events of the last few minutes. And I look out into the river in front of me and I see an object. It's my blade. And it literally floats right up and just kisses the front of my boat. I climb up to the front. I grab the oar or the blade. I set it back in my boat, and I look up and I say, "Very funny, grandfather."
Thank you, Mark. Well, when Mark isn't eating his peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches, yuck. He designs customs homes in the local area. I guess not. It's an acquired taste, I think. Enjoys spending time with his 2 kids, his 2 stepkids, and his 7 grandkids. Mark, we learned the other day, is a cult survivor. And a very well-known one, too. But that's another story. He says he's taught more college than he attended and takes his windshield time or road trips very, very seriously. So thanks again, Mark, for the great story. Appreciate it. So our next storyteller is Lee Reeves.
Is this good? You can hear me? Okay. So I'm in my late 20s. I live in Michigan, right about here. Closer. Is this better? All right. Okay, I'll stay right here. I live in Michigan, right here. The maples are ablaze with gold and red. It's my favorite time of year. And I have fallen in love with a brand new, dark-haired, black, dark-eyed, 2-week-old baby girl. Now, we took her home from the hospital a little less than a week, and my mother-in-law and I were spending all our free time just basking in the glow of a new baby. And we were just getting to know this new little being that came into our life. But before we left the hospital, the discharging physician was letting us go, and I noticed there was a little pink around her umbilicus. That's your belly button. And I said, "Is that okay?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's just probably irritation from her sheets. It's all good." So my mother-in-law, Hallie, and I are bathing our new baby, Lita, and we're in the kitchen sink, and the morning sun is just pouring in. And I noticed that pink is getting darker. And my mother-in-law looks very worried, and she tells me I should call a doctor, which really surprises me because she's a Christian Scientist. She's never been to a doctor as far as I know, and she doesn't tell people to go to doctors. So I did exactly what she said and called the office, and the nurse said, "You're a new mother. I think you're probably being overly vigilant. It's probably from the detergent. But if it makes you feel any better, take a ballpoint pen, draw it around the perimeter of the pink area, and if it gets worse, you can just call me back." So the next day, when we're changing Lita, we look, and it not only has it bypassed the perimeter. There's like little sharp, it looks like flames, and the area has gotten swollen around the umbilicus. Of course, I'm thinking some nice cream is going to fix this, some ointment. So I call the doctor's office, and this time the nurse says, "We've seen our last patient. If you can be here in 20 minutes, we'll see the baby." So we make it. The doctor lived very close, fortunately. And I'm in the treatment room undoing her little pink snowsuit. And the doctor comes in with a big scowl. He's kind of peeved. He's like, knows that this is probably not very big a deal, and he's irritated, and he just comes in and kind of pushes me aside and starts to peel her clothes off. And when he lifts the undershirt, his face changes radically. His eyes bulge, his mouth drops open, and he is frozen. He says nothing. And there's this terrible silence in the room. Then he turns to me and says, "This baby's sick. Does she have a fever?" I'm like, I never even thought to buy a thermometer. She's going to be a healthy baby. I did everything right, natural childbirth, wonderful diet. And then he said, he asked me if she'd been sleeping a lot. Well, she was 2 weeks old. I think so. And then he said, "You need to take her to the hospital right now. You don't go home, you don't get anything, you take her to the hospital, and they will be waiting for her." So my mother-in-law turns off the engine under the canopy, and I'm holding Lita. We didn't have to use car seats all the time back then. I'm holding her close, and suddenly I'm just overcome with fear. And I do not want to take this baby into the hospital. This was not in the script. And I feel weak, and I feel like scared and cowardly. And what's going through my mind is, I can't do this, I can't do this, I cannot do this. Suddenly, everything went silent. It was like still life, everything, inside the car, outside, and a calm came over me. And I heard a voice that sounded familiar, vaguely familiar. I couldn't really place where I might have heard it before, but it said, "Your attitude is your only power right now. And what you do is going to set the tone for the rest of this child's life. So take that baby and go into the hospital and do what you need to do." I turned to Hallie. She nodded. I got out of the car. And although I'd given birth 2 weeks earlier, I think that was the moment I became a mother. Now, on the 5th floor, they were waiting for us. They whisked us right into the room, and the doctor must have alerted them, and they started asking all the questions about the family. 6 kids, never been in a hospital. I'd never been in a hospital except maybe once to visit someone. And my husband's family, all of it. And then they tell me they're going to have to start an IV, and I'd say, "What's an IV?" I mean, I'm really clueless at this point. And they explain that they are going to have to put in some high-powered antibiotics, poison. I was never even going to give her sugar. And one of the antibiotics might cause her hearing damage, and that she's going to be there between at least 2 weeks. So I'm, of course, just shaken, but that voice, that power, it was, of course, more than a voice. It's like a presence. It was still with me. And the little entourage comes in with a little cart and all the needles, and the bag is hanging up with the fluid in it, and I'm kind of beginning to see this world. And, of course, the doctor says, "Mrs. Reeves, it's time for you to leave." And that voice was still there, and I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not leaving." Back then, it was a big deal. You weren't allowed you had visiting hours with your children, maybe 2 years, 2 hours a day. And I said, "Mrs. Reeves, you have to leave." The head nurse comes in and says, "Should I call security?" And he looked at her, looked at the baby, looked at me, said, "No, but if you give us any trouble, I will have you removed." Well, I already knew that I wasn't going to give them trouble. In fact, the voice had even told me not only to not give them trouble, that I have to help these people. I need them on my side. So when it came time to start poking her, which they started in her feet, I took and folded my body over hers to hold her down as she was flailing, and they kept, it's really hard to get an IV started in a little baby. So they kept poking and trying, and all of a sudden I decided I need to tell her what's going on, of course, right? She needs to know. So I start talking to her and explaining, they're going to put medicine in your body. It's going to sting. It's going to hurt when they put this needle in. And I explained to her, just like she was an adult, what was going to happen. And all of a sudden she stopped, and our eyes met, and we had this deep moment of connection that I knew we would always have. And they got the IV in after, I don't know how long, they got it in her head, and so they put a little Dixie cup on top of it. They had to shave her pretty hair and put a Dixie cup on it and put the needle in there. And for the next 2.5 weeks, it was the battle with the IV. They just kept coming out, but they had to get this medicine in her because she was nearly septic. And so, unfortunately, it turned out that was not a fluke, that she had a rare blood disease, and she lacked one of her white cells. And because of that, she would be in the hospital 50 more times before she was 5. And that voice, that presence, was with us, and that got us through. And whether you call it, it's like that still small voice, or you call it a higher power, or the hand of God, or intuition, whatever, it's there. And I believe it's always available to us. Only usually there's too much noise up here, too much noise out here for us to acknowledge it and feel its presence. But I believe it's always there. And I like to imagine that it was with us before we were born, and that it'll be with us when we move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, so growing up in Michigan, Lee wanted to be either a nun or a veterinarian. Okay, I'm sure there's a connection there. When I asked her what she likes to do in her free time, she said, "What's that?" Her favorite go-to meal is sardines straight out of the can. I don't know about these people. They're just food, and it's like too weird. Yuck. You know? Lee is currently working on a memoir about her daughter, Lita, and who passed away when she was 20 years old. She likes to walk around about town, spend time with her friends, dancing with Community Soul Dance, which takes place right here every Monday night. Plug. And there's some things out on the table there if you want to see that. Every Monday, 7:30, 7 to 9. Thank you. Yeah, 7 to 9. Okay. So on a strictly personal note now, I've known Lee for a few years. Did I hear, in about 4 years in June, my wife passed away. Some of you know that, and some of you don't. But one of the first people that showed up at my door was Lee. Even though her husband passed away the week before my wife did, she still came to see me and help me get through my grief. And knowing her has been a blessing in my life. So, another storyteller. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to go on the water and welcome Wolfgang Schminansky to the stage.
All of us like to have nice surprises, but we don't like bad surprises at all. And this particular story is about bad surprise that happened to be life-threatening to 3 mariners in my past. It happened actually in 1963 off the coast of Luanda, which is the capital of Angola in West Africa. And our ship was laying in front of this in order to load a cargo of 500 tons of teak trees or teak logs. At the time, I was an able-bodied seaman, which is about halfway between starting and becoming an officer or a captain. And with us, we had a little tugboat in order to help for this freight to get on board. I was in charge of that tugboat. These trips we did 4 times a year. It started out in Hamburg, where we would load all kinds of cargo for different countries in West Africa, and then go to Holland, and then Spain and France, again loading up more cargo, and then turn around, cross the Biscaya Bay, and start in Dakar, Senegal, and just discharging all these cargoes until we get to the lowest point in Luanda, and then turn around and come back up again. These trips took 3 months. The point of loading those particular logs are complicated because they are large and heavy. These trees were felled in the jungle of Angola, then transported to the Kwanza River, made into floats of about 30 trees, and then trucked down the river into the Atlantic Ocean, where the ship was laying to pick them up and take them to Europe. On this particular day, I was just getting off my night watch. This was from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and went to get some breakfast and go rest. When I heard some unusual screaming and noises coming from the deck, and it's very unusual because a ship at anchor is quiet. There's nothing happening. Well, I quickly go on deck and take a look to my right into the coastline. Holy shit. I couldn't believe it. Our tugboat that I'm in charge of was sitting in the ocean, perfectly still, the engine off, and it was just floating in the stream of the river coming out of the jungle. 2 men on board, an officer and a sailor, and they were doing this. But from a mile away, I had no idea what that meant. But figuring out that this particular tugboat had no motor, but the river, water coming out from this river pushed everything in its way, including the tugboat, right into the ocean. And if we don't get to it quickly, it will never be seen again, because the current is very strong, about 4 knots. So quickly, we know it's an emergency, but what do we do? Well, the first thing that came to my mind, the officer in charge. And oh, there he is, on the second deck, looking down for the cargo as they are being loaded. And as he got a hold and saw the tugboat sitting in the water, not moving, he quickly turned around, went inside the superstructure, into his cabin, never to be seen again, fleeing the emergency and also building deniability. What a guy. Right. Then the next thing, oh, the ship itself, we can use that. Well, a ship at anchor, in order for that to get going, you have to raise the anchor, obviously. You have to disconnect everything that's around the ship. Then you have to wait until the tide goes high enough so that you can get out over the sandbar that we had come over in order to get into the ocean. Basically 2 hours. Too late to save them. Oh, the crew. I'm looking on deck, there are several people just doing things, and I said, oh, they can help. And just like a choreography, all of them, there were only 9, just slowly turned away and disappeared from deck. I said, wow, what if it had been them or me in the tugboat. So what's left is pretty easy. I got a very strong feeling of duty, urgency, and the need to save those men. So I quickly took my clothes, took them off, just everything but the underwear. Then I found a roll of rope, about 50 foot long, put it on my belly and tied it up, and the other end on the railing. Then I climbed over down to the logs, walked on the logs to the end of it, and into the ocean I went. No other way. And in the meantime, the tugboat keeps on driving this way, and I'm here. So I have to go this way in order to catch it with my rope. And I'm doing a pretty good job, except my lungs of a pretty good smoker were already complaining. And secondly, I never learned any good swimming other than the breaststroke. And in the water with the rope around you and the ocean waves, you get very tired quickly. And I've done everything I could possibly do until suddenly, I couldn't go anymore. I had a pull on my back, and the rope was coming to an end. I got so mad. What the? And then I saw I was at the end of my rope, literally. So I yelled at the people, whoever was on board, to stick another piece of rope on it. And someone did, and then my energy was almost gone because I had to be standing there treading water until they did the stupid rope back on. But I did manage, and I caught it in time. I touched the tugboat, gave the rope to the sailor, he put it on a cleat, and then the two of them pulled me up into the tugboat, and basically disaster was averted. Well, not quite. Unfortunately, that night, same time again, 6 o'clock, I come on duty. More noise, more yelling, but this time more celebratory and enjoying. What the hell is going on? Again, I'm going to go to the foredeck. And as I look down into the water, I said, no fucking way! They were 4 12-foot gray-white sharks going in circle under the light that they had hung, and there was a steel wire hanging with a chicken, and there was a meat hook in it so they could possibly catch a shark and have fresh fish. Well, that didn't happen. But then I thought, wait a minute. I was just swimming here a couple of hours ago. How come I'm not dead? And I didn't get a good answer then, but I learned a lot, which I'll share at the end. And I found out that these sharks were actually no danger. I learned that great white sharks, they're fully grown, 16 feet long, they are eating sea lions and seals and small whales. And no humans, they don't. Hey! The ones I saw next to the ship were actually teenagers because they were only 12 foot. Teenage great whites only eat rays and large fish. No humans. Oh, I see. So here's a little bit of a suggestion for you. If you ever run into a situation where you are in the territory of sharks, don't worry about it. You may not be on their menu. There's also some consequence of the situation. First of all, I learned never to do what I did going alone. That is totally stupid. Always have another team stand by. The second thing is communications. You have to have, today it's an iPhone, but then it would be walkie-talkie, that you can talk to these people and see, why are they doing this? And we could have told them what to do with the rudder, because they could have easily turned the rudder to starboard. And as the ship is going, the tugboat is going this way, it would always go that way, which is where the ship was. So now I didn't have to go and jump in the ocean. Son of bitches. And the last thing is just that anything that you need in any kind of work, anything that moves and has to turn like an engine, so make sure they're in good condition, well-oiled and so on, and actually reliable. That's what I took away from that. And on the other end, on a personal issue, the officer that was so wonderful, he left the ship and was never seen again. And the seaman that was on the tugboat, he got himself a new pair of undershorts. Thank you.
So, fishtails. I'm not sure about the shark thing. Not eating people. If you're bouncing around there, we'll talk to Spielberg. He'll have some insight into it. Yeah. One of the great things about this program that we've been doing is meeting all of these wonderful new people, and they're just the various backgrounds and their lives that are so colorful and enriching, and the stories that they tell that you just look at them and say, my God, that's amazing. And, Wolfgang's story, this one that he just told, is just one of probably 100 that he has in his life. And I'll just give you a couple of things. He was born in Hamburg, Germany during World War II, and lived through the bombings and everything else that went on there. As soon as he could, he left, and obviously he joined the Merchant Marines, where this story came from. He's currently 82 years old, and he tells me he's working on getting all the way up to 142. So if you do, bottle it and sell it. So, and he's had an extremely varied life. At one point, he was importing folk ballets to the U.S. from Europe, Africa. He was importing folk ballets to the U.S. from Europe and Africa. He worked for a while in a heating and air conditioning company in California, a life coach. He came to America in 1968 and began a successful career as a commercial property owner. Truly a American success story. Super. Thank you, Wolfgang. Okay, so one more before the break, and our next storyteller is Kat Charlesworth.
The name of the story is called The Badass and the Chicken. I grew up in Prescott, and all right, okay, just put it right here. I grew up in Prescott, and I was finished with high school early. I was promoted a grade above, and when I was 16 years old, I found myself in my very first apartment in Phoenix, and I was too young and naive to realize exactly what kind of neighborhood I was in. It wasn't really bad then, but I wouldn't live there now. I was working a temporary job going from a nursing agency, from nursing home to nursing home. And back up, growing up, we were taught that everything on the outside has to look very perfect. And my favorite line of my dad's is, "Quit your crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about." There's never any parameters for this emotional display. So we grew up thinking that we were not allowed to cry. We were not allowed to show any emotion at all, which is like the result was resting bitch face. And I moved into this apartment with several other people. When the lease was running up, I applied for art school, was accepted, and the other people had moved out, and it was just me and then at that time my future husband. And I came home at 1 o'clock in the morning. He was at work. I had been taking weird hour shifts because night shift differential is a lot more money than regular day shift. And at that point, at 16 and living on my own, I needed the money. There was a small 22 caliber pistol in my medicine cabinet that was put there by one of my roommates. And at the time, when I first saw it, I questioned this, thinking, what the hell is there doing a gun in the medicine cabinet? I do not want to blow my face off while I'm brushing my teeth. But I was told, just leave it, you never know. So on this one occasion, as we were about to move out, there's no furniture in the house except for a chair and my bed and some clothing. I unlock the door, I go to my bedroom, I get undressed, throw on a bathrobe, go in the bathroom and pee, and I see this movement out of the corner of my eye. And I had 2 little ferrets that ran around. They were litter box trained, so I was used to seeing their little shadows, but nothing this high. And it kind of made me do a double take, and I stopped peeing miraculously. I don't know how that happens. I can't do that now. But a couple seconds later, I noticed that that movement was a hand. And right then and there, and I would try to imitate it, but I can't. Not before or since have I ever heard a sound like this leave my body. But I screamed so loud that I scared myself and this ginormous building of a man who had turned and come into the doorway of the bathroom, leaving me nowhere to run, nowhere to go, and I'm naked in a bathrobe, halfway done peeing. I don't know how I didn't pee on the floor, but I didn't. I don't remember doing that anyway. This calm came over me, and I don't know where that came from either, because I just reached up and I flipped that medicine cabinet open and I put that gun in his face. I could smell tobacco, I could smell alcohol, I could smell that nervous hoagie onion sweat. And I mean, this guy was big. He was I'm not a small person. I was this tall when I was 13. And he filled up the doorway. And I just calmly, well, I think I was calm. I felt calm. Put the gun in his face, and I told him to get the F out of my house or I was going to blow his effing head off. And I walked him all the way out of the apartment. And as he got to the door was locked because I had locked it behind me when I came in, and I told him, you're going to have to unlock that door. And when you exit, you're going to lock it back up and shut it behind you. And he said, if I remember correctly, this has been a long time ago, don't shoot me. And he turned and he unlocked the door and he locked it and he shut the door behind him, and I fell on the floor. Now, this is back in 1984 or 5-ish. We had just gotten 911 in Phoenix. I couldn't remember those 3 numbers to save my life. We had just had the phone shut off because we were moving out. No cell phones then. The apartment complex was very dark. There was a pool in the middle and a payphone past the pool. All I'm wearing is a gun and a bathrobe. And I had to summon that strength that Lee spoke about, that voice that said, get to the phone. And I ran. I don't know if I closed my bathrobe or not, but I ran to the phone, and the only number that I could remember was my then boyfriend's work phone number. And I called him. He was a dispatcher at an ambulance company, so he knew how to be calm. I did not. And I'm on the phone saying, there's guys in the apartment. Blah, 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 blah. And he said, do you have a gun? And I said, I do. He said, put it down. I said, no. And he said, the police are going to come. Put the gun down. I said, nope. He said, all right, I'll tell them you have it. Don't shoot them. And so I stood there shaking on the phone until the cops got there. So they led me back into the apartment, and they're doing their little investigation, and I'm still like shaking and sobbing and can't believe what had just happened. It scared the Jesus out of me. And we hear this commotion in the back of the apartment. They caught the guy getting back into the apartment through my bedroom window. So I'm really glad I didn't find the ending of that story. Just a couple months later, I had agreed to take care of greyhounds that my friend raced for a living. And I had bought a travel trailer, and for exchange for power and water and utilities, I was going to take care of these dogs, let them out, feed them, water them, do what needs to be done. Again, another night shift. I came home, and the trailer that I was living in was probably from me to the bar, away from the kennels were about from me to the bar, away from the trailer. And inside the kennels was about me to the bar, full of cages, one on top of the other. There's 15 dogs on each side, and there's 2 sides to the kennel. So I open all the doors, let all the dogs out into the yard that's fenced off. I start gathering bowls and, food and whatever. And I turned, and on the back row of the back wall of the kennel is about 4 gazillion bags of dog food, big giant bags. And I see this figure sit up. Now this time I had a bigger gun. But from me to the bar, I reverted right back to my childhood instinct. And rather than being calm like the bathroom, I panicked. I threw that gun. I turned around and I ran. I didn't think about it. I just ran. And I ran back to my trailer, slammed the door. There's no phone in there, but I'm screaming, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to call the cops. And this man, who was apparently just homeless, was yelling through the window, I'm putting your gun on the step. I'm not here to hurt you. I just needed a place to sleep. And I'm not going to shoot you. Just come out. And he says, all those dogs got out. There was 60 altogether. So now another type of horror hit me. Oh shit. I'm at 7th Street in Buckeye. I don't know if any of you have been there in the 80s, but the police didn't go there after dark. And so I had to lock or grab a hold of that fear. I had to open the door and face that person who meant me no harm, but I did not know that at the time. And he helped me get the dogs back into the kennel. And he became my friend. I let him sleep in there, and I just told him, listen, in case I ever have a real reaction, let me know if you hear me coming so I don't shoot you. But looking back and telling this story in rehearsals and whatever, the thing that keeps coming to me is when I was 16, I knew everything. You could just ask me, I'd tell you. I'm still kind of like that now, but worse then, is I knew that I would be okay because I was 16 and, I had the world by the ass. But I didn't know that the things that should have scared me didn't. And luckily, I survived it. But I'm very grateful for the experience because it taught me that no matter what you think you know, no matter what you think you're going to react to, it's never like you plan. Okay, you're going to have to do this so I don't. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So that's the last story before the break. A little bit about Kat. Obviously, she mentioned that she's lives here in Prescott since she was 7 years old. So good long time. It's about as close a thing to a native as we get around here. These times. What? Get closer to the mic. How's this? Okay, good. Kat told me she studied photojournalism, but then realized she had to eat. So after flunking her photography class here, she went on to other things. She loves to snack on salami, vegetable, and cream cheese sandwiches. Does anybody just like hot dogs, you know? Her Kat's special talent, wait for this, she can make a whole chocolate cake disappear. Her role model growing up was her uncle, who was a Navy SEAL. Yes. She said he was brilliant and taught her philosophy and existentialism. And I asked her if she was a TP over or under person, and she said she didn't care as long as it was there. But the Wildcards are different. They're just, who the heck, we have no idea. But remember, it's 5 minutes, and we got a good bounce.
Whatever you want.
Okay.
We got a lot of it.
We got a lot of them. We got a bunch in here. So, okay, I'm taking this one. Mallory.
My story's not as dramatic as some of that, but it has a little of that in it. My story is about, well, when my mom had ALS and she died of that, but I was taking care of her two dogs, Wanda and Lucy. And, well, she passed away, and so obviously taking care of these two dogs I inherited. I wasn't going to let them go at that point. So Wanda was a Schnauzer Poodle mix. She was smart as all get out. And Lucy was a long-haired Dachshund. So in the process of retiring, my mom dies. I moved to Prescott. It was just like boom, boom, boom. And I have these two dogs. And Wanda was a perfect dog. Like if I could legally walk her without a leash, she would walk right by my side. But Lucy, she would take off. Anyway, so this one day, and Wanda had a ailment of a collapsing trachea. So when she would have an attack, I would massage her neck, and it would come back, and she would be normal. But as time went on, that's the very thing that caused her heart to get enlarged, and then it actually took her out. But prior to that, after we moved to Prescott, I always like to take them down to the courthouse park because it's grass, and they just loved it. But Lucy, I'm rushing home, and I had to go to the bathroom so bad. I run into the house. I thought I closed the door, and I come out of the bathroom, and there's Wanda sitting there right by the door like a little pillar. And she looks at me, and she says, "I told her not to go. I told her not to go, Mom." And so now, if you understand, I live in a canyon area of homes, which has mountain lions, it has javelinas, it has coyotes. So I'm like freaking out. So before I went outside, I'm looking in every little possible place I could think Lucy would hide. Can't find her. So now I go down the hill, because I'm up a hill with 4 houses on this hill, and I start walking all over the canyon. Lucy! Lucy! And I have a loud voice, so I'm being mild right now, just saying. Because my voice was projecting clear across the canyon. And I'm like, "Lucy! Lucy!" And I'm like, "Oh God, please, don't let Lucy get hurt." And I start praying, "Lord, please help Lucy to come back. Please help her." And so I'm walking down, and I have neighbors coming out like, "What are you yelling at?" "I'm looking for my dog, Lucy." And so they're like, "Well, we'll get in a car and drive around and go help you look." And I'm like, I'm just on my feet. So I'm just running down the canyon, come down the circle, come around, run back up to the hill of the house. And I said, "Well, let me go back in the house to see if she's in there." I look all the places. No, she's not anywhere in the house. So I go back down. "Lucy! Lucy!" And Wanda's still just sitting there by the door like, nope, she's not home yet, Mom. So I go around that circle, and here's this little lady. She always walks, but she walks like this. And she has a cane, and so she walks that circle every day at 9:30, but she came out at this time. This was about, I'd say about 10:30, 11. And I'm coming around, and I back up at the hill, and she's coming up the hill to me, and she says, "What are you screaming about?" And I'm like, "I'm looking for my dog, Lucy." She's like, "You know, my house looks up at your hill and your house, all the houses on your hill, and I see this black little dot on that roof right there." I'm like, "What?" I look up. There's Lucy on the roof. She's on the roof of the 4 houses. I'm at the very end, and there's 4 houses down. So there's houses below us that are next to the hill. So the backside of the hill is like 6 inches. So Lucy can jump a curb. So that's what she did. She jumped up on that curb, and she went on to that house. And that lady said, "Yeah, she was walking from one side of the roof to the other side." And I said, "Lucy, you were surveying the canyon. Like that canyon belongs to me, and I'm going to guard it." And I'm like, "Come over here, Lucy." And I got her, and I was like, "You know what? I'm so happy that nothing happened to you, Lucy." Because, you know, dachshunds are susceptible to, their hind legs going out, and then they have to have those surgery on their lower back. So I went over there, and I picked her up. And she is a celebrity where I live, just to let you know. Every time I walk in my area, I have people that come up to me, "Oh, that's the dog that climbed the roof." I said, "Yes." So they know her she's famous where I live. But Wanda passed away last year. And Lucy grieved for Wanda, just to let you know. It was hard on Lucy because Lucy hid in my bedroom where Wanda hung out. But I came up with a song for Lucy. And the song goes like this: on our way down and on the way back, I say, "Lucy, I love you, Lucy. Oh, yes, I do. I love you, Lucy. Oh, yes, it's true. I love you, Lucy. I do. Oh, Lucy, I love you." That's the story.
Thanks, Mallory. That was unique. Funny story. Okay, so moving along, our next storyteller on the list is Mathew Perdue.
Oh boy. What have I done? A dramatic question considering the circumstances, but it's one that I seem to ask myself quite a lot. Even right now as I stand here before you, I wonder why I have put myself in this situation. My heart is beating out of my chest. My lungs can't seem to hold any air. My nerves are on fire. Everything in me is telling me to run out that door to where I feel safe. But why am I afraid? But that's what tonight's stories are about, right? How do we react in the face of fear? My social anxiety has pushed me to become a reclusive introvert with an awkward personality. For years, I have been carefully constructing the walls of my comfort zone so I can avoid the unpleasant sensations that come from connecting with the unfamiliar. To step outside of the boundary, even for something simple, often causes me to question my actions and to ruminate over the consequences, sometimes to such an extent that almost every decision I make in life is riddled with second guesses and regret. This way of life is a little lonely and depressing sometimes, but I enjoy my own company, and I've learned to pursue endeavors that don't involve pushing myself beyond my social limitations. One such activity I enjoy is hiking. I have an affinity for nature, and I find that when I am out on a trail or up a mountain, my troubles seem diminished and my mind is temporarily free from its constraints. In all my years of exploring the great outdoors, I've come across various forms of wildlife, but my favorites have always been the bear, the moose, the badger, the fox, the solitary creatures that keep to themselves and don't require constant social bonding in order to feel secure. Luckily, all of these encounters have been from a distance, but there was one occasion where I came face to face with an animal that I had hoped never to cross paths with. I had just moved to Arizona, and I was beating myself up so badly over this decision. I knew I had to break free, or else I would end up spiraling down into the void of self-loathing that often accompanies my periods of regret. I decided to head to the southeastern corner of the state to hike up a mountain called Miller Peak, which is situated in a wilderness area not far from the town of Sierra Vista. I hadn't anticipated for it to be an early morning adventure, but at the campsite I found that I could barely sleep, and I got this idea that experiencing the sunrise from the top of the mountain might be a symbolic way to welcome myself to this new chapter. It was barely 4 a.m. in the month of November, but with eagerness and mild hesitation, I got dressed, packed up my hiking gear, turned on my headlamp, and headed into the unknown. I had never done a sunrise hike before, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing I discovered is that the depth of the silence and the darkness is unsettling, but at the same time, strangely beautiful. There were several moments in the early part of my trek where I even stopped walking, turned off my headlamp, held my breath, and experienced that mysterious veil of nothingness. For the rest of the ascent, the only sound that I could hear was the crunch of my footsteps against the dirt, and the only sight I could see beyond the glow of my headlamp was a crescent moon hanging low in the sky, surrounded by stars. My awareness was heightened in this unfamiliar environment, and especially since I was on my own, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't afraid. What have I done? I pondered to myself as I made my way up toward the summit on the path. This is way beyond my comfort zone. I don't feel safe. I need to turn around. I can always come back when I'm more prepared. But I didn't listen to the logic, and I kept going with doubt and fear gnawing at my thoughts. Eventually, I made it to a point on the trail where the ground sloped down to the left and up to the right amid a landscape of tall grass and shrubs. The silence here was pervasive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone. I moved forward with caution, my senses on high alert, when all of a sudden I heard the slightest rustle of grass up the hill to my right. I turned slowly and looked up in the direction that the sound had come from. In the beam of light, I saw two glowing eyes staring straight at me, set within the shadowed face of a mountain lion just 10 feet away. To this day, I still can't describe exactly what I felt in the moment or how my mind was able to process everything so quickly, but there was no time to question my actions, no time to ruminate over the consequences. As I stood there looking into the eyes of the beast, I felt a deep, primal, guttural growl rise from somewhere within me. The sound emanated from my throat and reverberated through the night with a power and a force that I never imagined could come from me. I always thought that I would be the type to freeze or to flee in this situation, and I'm not sure who was more surprised, me or the mountain lion. I could sense that it was sizing me up as it stared for a few seconds more, but then it turned its head and sauntered away through the brush. Most sane people in this circumstance would have turned right around and headed straight back to camp, but for some reason I felt compelled to complete my journey. I made it to the top of the mountain in time to see the sun rising above the horizon. As the bright colors of the morning blended with the dark tones of the fading night, I thought that I might experience some great revelation or even the slightest sensation of belonging, but instead, all I could wonder was, what have I done? I thought about all of the choices that had led me to this point, and then I considered the more daunting questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? As I stood there at the pinnacle of this isolated wilderness, I wanted to feel nothing but inspiration and awe, but at the back of my mind were the self-deprecating questions. What's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Why do I shut myself off from the world of human connection? I stayed for a little while longer, watching the shadows of the distant peaks retreating from the light of the sun, and then I departed the summit feeling rather forlorn. I was unable to fully comprehend the significance of what I had been through until I made it to the spot where I had seen the mountain lion. I remembered that strange sound that had come from within, and then suddenly it dawned on me that maybe I'm braver than I give myself credit for. It took time, but I eventually began to wonder, what am I capable of? How can I change? When I look straight into the glowing eyes of loneliness and depression, can I summon that guttural growl and chase the feelings away? It's been 8 months since my encounter with the beast on the mountain, and in that time I've been through several moments of darkness and silence, but the important thing that I've learned is that the voice can be a powerful way to fight if you use it. I hope that someday I'll be able to use it in full force and that I might be able to tear down the walls of my comfort zone. But I think that for now, just being here, telling you this story is a step in the right direction.
You know, sometimes, and I kind of mentioned this before, about the people that you meet doing this and how interesting, but one of the other things is seeing them grow through this process and just building that confidence in themselves to take themselves to another level, doing something they've never done before and would never dream of doing, and here they are doing it, and it all happens in 6 weeks, So congratulations, Matt. So anyway, Matt is a recent addition to the Prescott area. When he's not at work, he is designing home and building framing trusses, right? Yep, okay, got it. Yeah, okay, cool. He enjoys hiking with his 2 dogs, Josie, who's a 14-year-old boxer, and Savannah, a 9-year-old chocolate lab. We actually met Matt at AZ Wordsmith at one of the open mic nights where he read part of a story that he's writing. He told us, he joined us at our storyteller workshop. That's a plug, by the way. Next week, storyteller workshop, and the rest is history, as they say. I did ask Matt one question, well, a bunch of questions, but the one I wanted to mention to you is about toilet paper. He's an over guy. Okay, so so that's probably more normal than any, but I don't know. But the reason that he's an over guy is because of the spiders that will crawl under the flap if it's backwards and wave their webs. So when you, well, use your imagination and kind of go with it, Okay, so our last storyteller of the afternoon, Roxie Barringer.
June 30th, 2013 was a day that I will never forget. It was a day when a devastating wildfire came rushing towards my family, my home, and my community in Peoples Valley. 2 days before, on a Friday, the 28th, there was a lightning strike. We have monsoons all the time. We get lightning strikes, we don't think anything about them. so it was no big deal. We saw smoke, but didn't think much about it. Saturday morning started, and it was a normal Saturday. We had our 3-year-old granddaughter for the very first time with Grandma and Grandpa. So we just kind of puttered around the house and played a little bit. But meanwhile, we always kind of kept our eyes out on that fire that was kind of south of us. And it was quite a ways away, but we are in Arizona, and we do worry. Sunday morning, we woke up. I was ready for the day. Let's go to church. So Tess and I, we got up and got ready and came into Prescott to church. Well, Russ, my husband, said, I don't feel good leaving the place. How about if I'm just going to stay here and keep an eye on the place, and it'll be fine. Well, about 9:30, I get a call. We were about on our way home, and Russ is saying, get home and get home now. Okay, so as we come into our driveway, into our home, and he's got the trailer's loaded. He's got the motorcycles loaded. I can see the photo albums are loaded, the computer's loaded, all the important papers. He's ready to go. And he says, well, you've got a minute. Run in and see what you want to grab. So I run in the house and I stand there, stand still and look. What do you grab? You've got minutes. Your whole life is in that home. Yeah, the big stuff's gone, but the little stuff is where our heart is, isn't it? There's that quilt that his blind grandmother hand quilted. There's that clock that my brother gave us for a wedding present 47 years ago. There's all this stuff that's close to my heart, and I have seconds to grab it. Well, I honestly can't even tell you what I grabbed. But I left, and we started getting down the driveway. And at the bottom of our driveway, we have about 20 acres. And at the bottom of our driveway was a fire official. And he was saying, oh, I was just coming to tell you to evacuate. We're evacuating your whole area first. And Russ said, there's no way. We're out of here. That's a killer, and we are going. And before we left, we turned around to the fire official and said, our house is unlocked, so if you need to get in it, get in it. We've got a nice cleared area. He knew our home. And we said, well, we don't have any animals, but we do have fish, an outside pond. So if you get a chance and you're up there, would you feed them? Sure. And we take off. So we're going over the dirt road to try to get to the paved. And as we're driving, I look in my rearview mirror, and the fire, I thought, had been quite a ways from us. And I see the fire cross the road in my rearview mirror. It was just like a finger that was coming out. There was no going back to our home. We didn't leave the area. We went a couple hills over because we wanted to keep an eye on our home to see, and the fire, what was going to happen. We're sitting at a friend's home, watching the fire come towards our house, and it's coming faster and faster. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're sitting there, and the most wonderful sight that I've ever seen in my life. A DC-10 comes over, right over our home, and dumps an entire load of fire retardant. And that quick, the winds changed 180. They had been coming towards us, and it flew back south. The wind was going back to Yarnell, 40 to 50 miles an hour on new fuel. And it was at that time that we lost our firefighters, the Granite Mountain hotshots. We didn't know anything about it at that time. It wasn't until the next day that we found that out. But as we sat there, we could hear propane tanks popping. Pop, pop, pop. The fire kind of calmed down a little bit. It was there again. It was going south away from us. It was all burnt around us, so we weren't worried. We went to bed, at least for a couple hours. And about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard sirens and alarms saying, evacuate, evacuate People's Valley, evacuate. And so I pick up Tesla off the floor and I say, honey, we're going on a trip. Let's go. And we walk out of that house. And it was night. It was eerie. It was so eerie. The smoke was so heavy that you could taste it. And as I looked over on the hill beyond our house, you could see the fire was breathing. It was moving along the side. It was the most eerie thing I'd ever seen. So we get in our car and we go on to Phoenix. Well, we're down there and there's hardly any communication coming out. We don't know what's going on. We knew some of our friends' homes had been burned. We didn't know if our home had been burned. We didn't know who had been hurt. We were just getting a little bit of what was going on. It was 5 days before we had permission to go back. And as we're driving, by this point we knew our home had been saved. But until I could see it with my own eyes, I wanted to know it. And as we come up over that hill, we had been driving through a moonscape where the fire had come across that road when we were leaving. It was all ash. There had been pine trees and sage. It had been beautiful. And now all that was there was a couple inches of sand, of ash, boulders, and these black stumps that were there. And we come over that hill and we see our home. Wow. We'd made it. So we drive down, and as we're coming up, we cross into our property, and there's a sign there that a firefighter had wrote, and it said, "Home okay, feed the fish." Yeah. Now, fight, flight, or freeze. Some of our neighbors stayed. Some of them decided, I'm going to get out there with that hose, and I was going to do it. Boy, not us. We ran. You can replace a home. We had cleared the land ourselves. We had built the home ourselves. That can be redone. That can be rebuilt. We'd even built a steel home because, as Russ said, it's not if, it was when a fire was coming. But we could not rebuild that 3-year-old sweet granddaughter of ours, my husband or ourselves. We were thankful and glad to run. Thank you.
Wow, I made it from a different perspective, an event that we all know. Roxie still lives in People's Valley, and so she's come a long way to tell that story here. Well, a long way, a decent way. Okay, but came via Montana, of all places, and has been in the area for 24 years. She has been a quilter for over 40 years. A self-described adrenaline junkie. She once walked across England for her 60th birthday, and just because it was there. Growing up, wanted to be a genie, but couldn't find the right outfit. So now she spends her time with her grandkids, traveling, gardening, volunteering. She is a Meals on Wheels delivery driver and is the local community board president as well. Thank you, Roxie.